We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed.
The global economic landscape has shifted dramatically, and right now, the high-stakes chess match between Ottawa and Washington is reaching a boiling point. For months, the headlines have been dominated by the threat of sweeping tariffs, aggressive border policies, and a complete rewrite of the North American trade dynamic. To the untrained eye, it looks like Washington holds all the cards. The sheer size of the American economy, combined with an administration that is entirely unafraid to use aggressive economic leverage, has left many analysts wondering if Canada is simply playing a losing hand. But behind the scenes, a completely different narrative is unfolding. Canada's leadership, spearheaded by the strategic calculations of Mark Carney, isn't just playing defense. They are sitting on a massive, highly specific strategic advantage, a secret leverage point that Washington absolutely cannot force a deal on, no matter how intense the political pressure becomes. To truly understand why this asset is so bulletproof, you have to look at the broader geopolitical reality facing the United States right now. Washington is locked in a multi-front economic Cold War, scrambling to secure its domestic supply chains, transition its industrial base, and decoupled from hostile foreign adversaries. The entire American strategy relies on one critical assumption: that it can access the raw materials, natural resources, and strategic inputs necessary to fuel its high-tech, defense, and industrial sectors without being dependent on overseas rivals. And this is exactly where Canada's secret leverage comes into play. It isn't just about oil, and it isn't just about traditional manufacturing. It is a highly specialized, localized asset class that is utterly irreplaceable to the immediate and long-term economic security of the United States. When you look at standard trade negotiations, the typical playbook involves a lot of posturing. One side threatens a tariff, the other side threatens a retaliatory tariff, and eventually both sides find a middle ground because mutual economic destruction serves no one. But what happens when one country possesses an asset that the other country literally cannot live without, and which cannot be sourced from anywhere else on the planet without triggering a massive national security crisis? That is the position Canada finds itself in today. This isn't an asset that can be easily substituted, nor is it something that can be manufactured out of thin air by American factories, no matter how many subsidies Washington throws at the problem. The strategy engineered by Carney relies on the fact that the United States has built an entire domestic economic revival plan that is fundamentally dependent on Canadian inputs. Think about the massive investments being made in advanced manufacturing, next-generation aerospace, critical infrastructure, and national defense logistics across the American Rust Belt and the tech hubs of the South. Every single one of these projects requires specific, highly refined critical minerals, specialized energy grid integrations, and raw technological inputs that Canada controls in absolute abundance. If Ottawa decides to restrict, heavily regulate, or redirect the flow of these specific assets, the entire American industrial engine grinds to a devastating halt. Washington knows this, which is why the public rhetoric coming out of the administration is so aggressive. It is a classic negotiation tactic: project absolute strength externally to mask a fundamental vulnerability internally. The administration is trying to force an early, sweeping trade deal precisely because they want to lock down access to this Canadian asset before Ottawa fully realizes the immense power it holds. But Carney, with his extensive background guiding both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England through massive global financial crises, sees right through the bluster. He understands that in a game of economic chicken, the side that controls the irreplaceable bottleneck always wins. What makes this specific Canadian asset so immune to American pressure is that it cannot be seized, coerced, or penalized through standard tariff mechanisms. If Washington slaps a heavy tariff on Canadian steel or aluminum, it hurts Canadian producers, but it also spikes costs for American builders. But if Washington tries to penalize this specific strategic asset, they end up completely starving their own advanced industries of the very lifeblood they need to compete on the global stage. It is an economic self-destruct button that the White House simply cannot afford to press. Because of this, Canada holds a permanent veto over the terms of the broader economic relationship. Let's break down exactly how this leverage plays out on the ground. For the past several years, the global race for supply chain dominance has intensified. The United States has passed massive legislative packages aimed at bringing manufacturing back home. But building a state-of-the-art factory is completely useless if you don't have the foundational materials to run it. Canada possesses the world's most secure, ethically sourced, and logistically integrated deposits of the exact critical elements required for this industrial renaissance. More importantly, Canada has the processing capabilities and the direct transport infrastructure to deliver these goods directly to American factories without crossing an ocean. There is no alternative partner on Earth that can offer that level of security and convenience. Carney's strategy is to tie the access of this critical asset directly to broader trade concessions. The message from Ottawa to Washington is becoming increasingly clear. If you want a frictionless border for American goods, if you want Canada to cooperate on continental defense, and if you want guaranteed, uninterrupted access to the foundational elements of your economic future, then the aggressive tariff threats must be taken off the table. It is a masterful flip of the script. Suddenly, Canada is no longer the smaller trading partner begging for a fair deal. Canada is the gatekeeper of America's industrial survival. This explains why the recent high-level meetings between trade officials have felt so incredibly tense. On the surface, American negotiators are demanding total compliance, throwing around numbers and deadlines designed to rattle the Canadian public and pressure the government. But behind closed doors, the conversation is entirely different. American industrial leaders are quietly sounding the alarm to the White House, explicitly warning that any move that disrupts the flow of this specific Canadian asset will result in immediate factory closures, massive layoffs, and a catastrophic spike in inflation across the United States. The genius of holding an asset like this is that its value only increases as global tensions rise. In an unstable world where shipping lanes are constantly threatened and geopolitical rivalries are intensifying, a secure, land-linked neighbor with an abundance of strategic resources is worth its weight in gold. Canada isn't just a trading partner, it is an economic insurance policy for the United States. And Carney knows that you don't let the person you are insuring dictate the price of the premium. As we move deeper into this month, the clock is ticking on major trade reviews and treaty obligations. The pressure on both sides to reach an agreement is immense. The public will continue to see sensational headlines about impending trade wars and economic collapses, but the reality is that Canada's position is incredibly secure. The one asset Trump can't force a deal on acts as a permanent shield against economic bullying. It ensures that when the final deal is struck, it will be done on terms that respect Canadian sovereignty and protect Canadian economic interests. Ultimately, this showdown is a masterclass in modern economic statecraft. It proves that raw size and aggressive rhetoric are no match for deep structural leverage. By identifying the exact vulnerability in the American economic model and positioning Canada as the ultimate solution to that vulnerability, Carney and the Canadian leadership have completely neutralized Washington's biggest weapons. The trade negotiations ahead won't be a story of Canadian concessions. They will be a story of how a single, irreplaceable asset forced the most powerful economy on Earth to come to the table and negotiate as true equals.